So welcome to this online symposium organized by Nonviolence Group in Western Sahara, NOVA. This symposium is coincident with the Sahrawi National Day, which is just yesterday. The Arabic Sahrawi Democratic Republic yesterday celebrated its 46th anniversary of the Sahrawi National Day. And today we will want to share with us this symposium with under the slogan of the international solidarity with Western Sahara. So we have with us today some participation from the Secretary General of the International Peace Association, IPRA, from Meyer. We have also another intervention from Lotta, Becker, President of the International Fellowship of Reconciliation, IFOR. And we have the last intervention. It will be done by Mr. Mohamed Mayara, the coordinator of Equipe Media. And of course, we have also Mrs. Enguia Mohamed, the President of the Nonviolence Group, which so Enguia, you are welcome. You can start.
Assalamu alaikum and hello everybody. We are really very happy and grateful for your attendance today, and we really appreciate that you have joined us in this big occasion, which is the 45th anniversary of the declaration of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, SADR. And in our seminar titled "The Role of the International Solidarity with the Western Sahara." So first of all, I will talk very quickly about the issue of Western Sahara. I will give you a brief of it. So Western Sahara, or better said, the last colony in Africa, was colonized by Spain from 1884 until 1975. And in this year, 1975, the Convention of Madrid has been signed, and according to it, Western Sahara was colonized by Morocco and Mauritania in the same time. And this is a big evidence that Western Sahara is not a part of Morocco, because it's not illogical that there is a country in the world that will give a part of it to another country. That is not logical. Of course, Mauritania after 3 years, in 1978, retracted from Western Sahara, and Western Sahara remained colonized by Morocco until today, without caring about the international legitimacy, neither the international charters. So in 1991, the agreement of ceasefire between Morocco and Polisario. Polisario is the unique and legitimate representative of the Sahrawi people according to United Nations. So as I said, there was a ceasefire agreement between the two parts, and under the supervision of United Nations and the African Union. And United Nations promised the Sahrawi people that it will organize a referendum of self-determination for the Sahrawi people, so that they can choose freely their fate and decide their fate freely. But unfortunately, that didn't happen until the moment. And the Sahrawi people remained suffering of refugee, poverty, prevention of its homeland, and for more than 45 years. Talking about the actual situation, in the past October, there were some Sahrawi civilians demonstrating in front of the illegal loophole called Gargarat, which is illegal, and it is itself, it is a violation of the agreement of ceasefire, because it is not included in this agreement. And also the Sahrawi civilians there were asking for their right of referendum and reminding the United Nations that it must do its promise to the Sahrawi people and organize self-determination, in this time. So they remained protesting there until the 13th of November, which is the day that Morocco violated again the agreement of ceasefire by attacking some Sahrawi civilians protesting them there, and that is what led to the start of the war again. Talking about the situation in the occupied territories, it's really catastrophic, because there are a lot of violations of human rights, especially the women's rights and children. And best example of that is the activist Sultana Khaya and her family, which is suffering of all the types of human rights violations, home blockade, tortures, arrests, hitting her, and the home blockade of her family, unfortunately. And she is just one example of millions of other examples of violations of human rights there. And also, we must speak about a very important issue for us, like Sahrawis, which is the issue of the plunder of Western Sahara natural resources by Morocco. Okay, so I said that the international civil society can do lots of activities that are effective and will sure bring positive results for our issue. I have mentioned some points and I will continue. You can also make pressure on the companies that participate in the plunder of Western Sahara by boycotting their products. And you can also make and organize peaceful stands in front of the embassies of the countries that contribute in the continuation of the colonization of Morocco on Western Sahara, and also advocating for the Sahrawi issue in the international forums. And finally, I thank all of you, and we are very grateful for your attention and for your interest.
So now we move to the next intervention, which we should be by Lotta Johnson Becker, President of the International Fellowship of the Constitution. So with Lotta, you can start.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Lotta Sjöström Becker. I am the president of the International Fellowship of Reconciliation. Some of you also know me as the Secretary General of the Swedish Fellowship of Reconciliation, but I'm here in the role of E4, the president of E4. And thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor to be here. I will share a few words with you. International Fellowship of Reconciliation is perceiving the need for healing and reconciliation in the world. And the founders of International Fellowship of Reconciliation formulated a vision of the human community based upon the belief that love in action, non-violence, has the power to transform unjust political, social, and economic structures. And today E4 has branches, groups, and affiliates in over 40 countries on all continents. And we're happy to say that NOVA is part of this family. And although we're organized on a national and regional basis, EFOR seeks to overcome the division of nation states, which are often the sources of conflict and violence. And our memberships includes adherents from all the major spiritual traditions, as well as those who have other spiritual sources for their commitment to non-violence. So, as the chairperson of NOVA said, in 1991, the United Nations and the international community made a promise to the Sahrawi people that the referendum would be organized so that they can freely and fairly decide their own fate. 30 years later, that promise remains unfulfilled. And the recent events a few months ago demonstrates that a continued status quo and continued inaction from the international community, but also the actors in the region, it is not sustainable and it's not acceptable. The International Fellowship of Reconciliation, EFOR, was founded over 100 years ago in response to the horrors of the First World War. Since then, EFOR has taken a consistent stance against war and its preparation. When people and organizations commit themselves to action, war and conflicts can be prevented and transformed through non-violent means. Such action is now urgent and well overdue. The UN needs to take concrete steps to de-escalate the current situation and demonstrate a serious commitment to renewed negotiations. EFOR welcomes any efforts by the UN to immediately seek an end to the current destructive escalation. We think that these efforts must be intensified. The international community needs to take their responsibility. Further, we have called upon the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, to without delay, and I say it again, appoint a new UN personal envoy for Western Sahara to demonstrate and enable a resource and focus that says that continued status quo is not acceptable. This position has been vacant now from almost, I guess, soon 2 years. And because it's vacant, the main avenue for non-violent engagement between the parties is closed, and the peace process is at a standstill. The immediate appointment of a new personal envoy is the very least the UN can do to signal to those desiring a non-violent resolution to the conflict that this path is still open, is still possible. EFOR also calls on the governments in the region and around the world to contribute to a peaceful solution of the Western Sahara conflict and the implementation of the fundamental rights of the people living in these territories. The UN member states must act in accordance with the UN Charter 3 and demonstrate that continued military escalation and violence is unacceptable. The outbreak of a new conflict, armed conflict, or war in the region would constitute a grave risk for people's lives and livelihoods. And now, with the COVID-19 pandemic, this has put severe strains on an already difficult situation and would further complicate any humanitarian and other relief efforts that would follow a conflict or a war. It is an imperative that this is avoided and that a credible path to a peaceful process, a peaceful resolution is established. And the international community must commit and show that this is important. EFOR members shares a vision of a world where conflicts are resolved through non-violent means, where systems that foster fear and hatred must be dismantled, and where justice is sought as a basis for peace. While we in E4 are coming from diverse religious backgrounds, we share a common belief in the transforming power of nonviolence and reconciliation. We believe in the power of nonviolence. Thank you.
Yes, welcome. You can start until Mohamed Mayara comes.
So greetings and congratulations on this important 45th anniversary. My name is Meyer. I'm the Secretary General of the International Peace Research Association. And it's a great honor to be with all of you today and to be in this celebration and commemoration and conversation about international solidarity with the people of Western Sahara. This is a great day to gather together. And of course, it's part of many activities that have taken place this last week and this last period, looking at the anniversary, but also looking at some of the heinous actions taken by the US government in the last days of the regime of Donald Trump, and the heinous, equally heinous inactions that have taken place in response to those actions by the global community. I'm going to say a couple of words about my own organization, and then 3 basic points about international solidarity. And then hopefully our dear brother Mayara will join us and we can then open it up to general conversation. First, about IPRA. As our name implies, the International Peace Research Association is mainly involved in academic pursuits, mainly involved in the intensification of research about issues of peace and justice and conflict around the world. And though we are not as old as our dear sister, the International Fellowship of Reconciliation, we have been around since 1964, founded by some of the leading figures within peace studies and peace education. Johan Galtung from Scandinavia, and then here in the US, Elise Boulding, a Quaker activist. And it was noteworthy that towards the end of her life, Dr. Boulding said to us, it is time not to be learning about the conflicts in Africa. It is time to be learning from the people of Africa about their efforts for peace. So not so much about, and not so much focused on the negative, but from, and focused on the positive. And I do believe, though we are talking today about solidarity, that there's a tremendous amount that the world has to learn from the people of Western Sahara about building a peaceful tomorrow. I also want to say that the issue of decolonization, the issue of independence, the issue of support for Western Sahara has gone far, far beyond an academic matter. No research needs to be done to figure out at this point whether Western Sahara's right to independence and freedom is a legitimate one. That research has been done and done again and done again. And the proof is clear beyond academics that the injustices that continue, violent and in terms of essential and basic human rights, are ones that anyone with the most basic understanding of internationalism and humanitarianism would agree Western Sahara must be free. So it's not fundamentally an academic pursuit, which is why my organization, the oldest in the field, is not calling for more research on the situation of Western Sahara, but rather for more solidarity. I will say that we do try to work within, and we do work within academic bodies around the world and around the continent. We have regional associations from every region of the world, and our African Peace Research and Education Association also stands with us today. And we partnered just this last year with a prominent South African think tank called Good Governance Africa. We know that the South Africans have been, as a government and as a people, particularly strong and steadfast in their solidarity with the people of Western Sahara. And so with Good Governance Africa, which is a continental body, IPRA partnered to contribute to a publication that came out in the last year, the third volume of their analysis of what they call terrorisms in Africa. And our contribution, which was focused on the situation of Western Sahara and on Ambazonia in the so-called Cameroons, was that colonialism and neocolonialism is a contemporary form of terrorism in Africa today. So we can talk about some of the more traditional definitions of terrorism as they're displayed by mainstream media, but make no mistake about it. Moroccan continued occupation of Western Sahara and international collusion and support for Morocco is, in our evaluation, and as we put out with Good Governance Africa, a formidable form of contemporary terrorism. So the terror must stop and Western Sahara must be free. That's my little pitch about my organization and peace research and the International Peace Research Association. Now I'll say briefly 3 points about international solidarity. The first is that for us, the solidarity imperative, first and foremost, is that now, 2021, is a time to move from increased education to intensified action. And while we have spent 45 years working, and of course, especially the people of Western Sahara have spent 45 years and more struggling, we must both increase the education and intensify the action. And so I have some reasons for hope. I have to say, some of my colleagues that are on this call with us today are engaged in and about to unfurl a website, primarily in English to begin with, to really spread information about this colony that far too many people in the North, in the US, in North America, in Europe, do not know anything or know very little about. So the increased education is, I think, just at the point of movement, I think, on several key levels in the coming weeks and months. But that education cannot be for education's sake alone. We must combine it with solidarity actions, such as the actions that our dear Sister Enguia and our colleagues in NOVA have suggested. Those actions include all that were mentioned: letter writing, lobbying, campaigning and pressure on politicians, but it's also grassroots people-to-people action. And that leads me to the second point. Like our sisters at E4 and War Resisters International and so many other bodies, we recognize that the power of civil resistance, the power of nonviolence, has not been fully utilized. And I can't say more about this without reflecting upon the extraordinary time that I spent at the Sahara Rise conference some years ago, hosted in the camps of the people of Western Sahara in the far western end of Algeria, just on the border, where 4 really groups of people were brought together. There were a few solidarity activists like myself, like representatives of E4 and some others. but really the coming together of people from the occupied territories, people obviously from the camps, and Saharians from the diaspora, to have this international space to say we must deepen and explore the power of civil resistance and civil disobedience and direct action. Whatever takes place on the global scale and between nations regarding armed actions and armed struggle, the power of civil resistance still needs to be strengthened and intensified. This is clearly a point that NOVA puts at the forefront, but it's also a point, I think, for the international solidarity community to recognize. It is time for the burden of civil resistance to not simply be on the people of Western Sahara. And as we look at the history of the movement against apartheid in South Africa, as we look at the history of the still not fully successful or completed movement of boycott and divestment in terms of solidarity with Palestine, we must put Western Sahara at that level of intensity where people-to-people actions to disinvest our own monies, not just our government monies, in Moroccan goods and services and culture that support the occupation, as well as potential actions that draw public spotlight and attention to the situation. So the power of civil resistance continues and must be intensified. And my third and last point, and then I'll stop for the moment, is it's important at this moment more than ever to look at the context and to look at the shifting and changing context that we've been in. One exciting development that a couple of people, again, on this call are aware of that have taken place in the last year is an analysis that says we have to look at all current colonialisms in a broader theme and in connection with one another. And what that means in simple terms is to understand that while we say forthrightly that Western Sahara is the last colony of Africa, we also understand that Amazonia is a colony in Africa, a colony in a neo-colonial situation where the peoples who are called Cameroons are in fact their own independent people fighting chiefly non-violently for independence in their own right. So Amazonia joins with Western Sahara as a still occupied territory in Africa. In addition, we have Palestine, we have Tibet, we have Puerto Rico, we have Kashmir, we have territories around the world that are still facing some or another form of direct colonial control, and in unity there is strength. So it's been extraordinary and exciting to see and be part of a very small and burgeoning, a beginning effort of some of those people to work together, to share strategies and tactics, and soon to become more public with the kind of collective and collaborative and coordinated solidarity that we in the international community need to furnace. So that context is, I think, a 2021 context. And lastly, of course, as we meet together in Zoom, as we meet together across borders and across airwaves, we recognize that we will come to a point, maybe not soon enough, but sooner rather than later, where we are living in a post-COVID-19 world. And the post-COVID-19 world for us has to declare that we will never return to the old normalcy. We all want to get back to normal, which is to say, we want to hug one another. I want to hug each and every one of you in the same room, not just virtually. But while we can hug one another, we must never go back to the normality of colonialism, of capitalism, of imperialism, of patriarchy, of the norms of oppression that existed in the world before. So if the entire planet have come together in some ways to experience this COVID moment, this pause of business as usual, it is a time to assert that the new context of a post-COVID world must be one where the injustice of colonialism, the injustice of the occupation of Western Sahara is a top priority to never ever go back to. So with that words, I'll say again, thank you to NOVA. Thank you to all of the people of Western Sahara. Congratulations on this 45th anniversary. It is time not to celebrate anniversaries, but to celebrate final victory and independence for the people of Western Sahara. Inshallah, thank you and much love.
So thank you, Meyer. Meyer is the Secretary General of the International Peace Association, IPRA. So now we move to the next intervention. Actually, we supposed to have with us Mohamed Mayara, but Mohamed Mayara didn't join us until now. While Mohamed Mayara come, we can open the question. If anybody have any question or something to add, you can tell us.
Sorry, Mohamed Mayara has electrical cut, and maybe he can't join us. So I'm very sorry on his behalf.
So if anyone have any question or something to add, you can tell us.
Hello. Yes, I have some comments and a couple of information. I would like to make some comments on the question of solidarity, which is the subject of this webinar. I don't know if you have heard what Professor Stefan Zuns has said this last days in several webinars as well, but and what he wrote by already for many years in different places concerning the question of solidarity. He thinks that the most powerful weapon to the liberation of Western Sahara is indeed the international solidarity. Why? Because he says that it is the people who in all countries who can, the civil society who can make pressure to bear on the governments so that they change the position where in many cases is a bad position, or at least so-called a neutral, where they look to the other side when they make criticisms about other situations, but not about the question, but not the problem of Western Sahara. I must say, I am the secretary of the International Platform of Jurists for East Timor, for those who don't know me. And East Timor was also able to get free thanks to the solidarity in the world. But there's here something very important, and Professor Zuns said that, wrote that in many places, starting, for instance, in a chapter of our book, and first in a conference in The Hague, where from this book started, where he says that if the solidarity for Western Sahara was working in the same way and with the same system, if it was working in Western Sahara as it worked in East Timor, that probably Western Sahara would be free now. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Unfortunately, there are a lot of circumstances. I don't know why, I must say, because nowadays it's much easier to have contacts among all groups in the world, for instance, solidarity groups. But we even now, I know that a lot of people in Europe, for instance, doesn't know what the groups exist in Africa, or the groups who exist in Australia, or the groups who exist in Japan, for instance. We should have a coordination, a good coordination. Unfortunately, as you know, the solidarity with the Western Sahara started with the Ukoko, but the Ukoko is mainly European, and even then is not completely true. It's only Western European, and even in Western European is not completely true, because they are making these solidarity meetings, big solidarity meetings in mainly 4 different countries, in Spain, France, Belgium, and Italy, sometimes in other places. Now, it is important, but really very important, that the coordination is done, and done with all possible groups everywhere in the world. About what Meyer said, I would like to say something as well. The education has been done, and information about what's going on in Western Sahara is being done by ARSO and with the couple of Martinolis. It was great. It is still a very, very important place where you can have information about Western Sahara, but I don't know why. It's also, a lot of people doesn't know to accede to ARSO. Another thing, and concerning the third point that he mentioned about the importance to see the context concerning this problem of Western Sahara, and it is something that I've been saying already for many years, and I'm glad that it was mentioned, that you can't speak about liberation of Western Sahara alone. You have to connect it with other cases, and particularly the case of Palestine. East Timor is free. It was, if you see it in terms of international law and international relations, of course, is the case of East Timor much more equal, similar. I used to say that they are like 2 drops of water. They are very, very similar, but Timor is already free, Western Sahara not yet. The case of Palestine, which has to be solved as well, it is indeed similar to the case of Western Sahara, and I don't know that, as for several reasons, there are no connection between these 2 cases. The East Timor, the Western Sahara, people of Western Sahara was perhaps afraid to be connected with the Palestine, because in the beginning they of course were working in a way with terrorism, which is what the Sahrawis never used. That is great. On the other side, from the side of Palestine, they have the lip service of the Arab countries, who are practically almost all with Morocco, and therefore they didn't want to be connected with Western Sahara, because afraid of losing the support of those countries. And well, if there is something more that you want to know, I'm here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Pedro. Indeed, we appreciate any type of solidarity with the Western Sahara. Yes, anyone have any question? Anything about?
Hello, I have a comment. May I speak?
Yes, welcome.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you, NOVA, for this invitation. My name is Sid Ahmed Jouli. I am a Sahrawi activist living in Sahrawi refugee camps. I am a coordinator of campaign Western Sahara is not for sale, a campaign that we launched recently against the illegal plunder of Western Sahara natural resources. And I would like to say that I think it's very hard for you as NOVA to advocate for non-violence, especially here in refugee camps.
The extremely deployment of the occupying forces have succeeded in preventing large-scale protests in the city. Nevertheless, the Sahrawi Clandestine Female Activists Committee organized demonstrations around the city to mark International Women's Day.
المرأة الصحراوية بالعيون المحتلة اختارت أن تكسر الحصار من أجل أن ترفع أعلام الجمهورية العربية الصحراوية الديمقراطية مطالبة بالاستقلال ولا شيء غير الاستقلال.
During their march, protesters sang patriotic songs, chanted political slogans, waved the SADR flag, distributing leaflets calling for self-determination and independence, and expressed solidarity and support with Sultana Khayyan Mohamed Lamin Hadi. They also criticized the United Nations for failing to protect Sahrawis. Sahrawi activists still believed in asserting their legitimate claims by peaceful means, while Morocco is grievously destabilizing for the region by an escalation of military aggression and intensification of political repression against Sahrawi activists and vulnerable and disadvantaged groups.